Sophie woke up with burning eyes. She didn't know if she had cried or dreamed of tears. Everything was a blur. The night before felt like a sweaty nightmare, a whispered threat beneath silk sheets. But when she walked downstairs and saw her father, wrinkled suit, defeated face, sitting before a black leather folder, she knew the nightmare was real. Welcome to Love Above All, Passion and Power Stories. Before we begin this story, I want to propose a challenge. If you enjoy the first few minutes, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. She agreed to marry the enemy to save her family, but ended up surrendering her heart. What started as a contract fueled by revenge turned into a scorching love, strong enough to withstand scandals, betrayals, and ghosts from the past. Get ready for a story of heartbreak, redemption, and passion that defies all limits. Ready to begin? Let's go. Sophie Wallace never imagined his name would echo through the cold halls of the mansion again, but there it was, printed in bold letters on thick legal paper. Dominic Hayes, the man her father had sworn would never set foot on Texan soil again. The man accused years ago of theft, betrayal, and assault, and thrown into prison without a fair trial. The same man who, according to rumor, vowed to destroy everyone responsible for his downfall. And now he owned the Wallace Winery debt. The entire family empire was in his hands. Sophie held the document with trembling fingers. Deep down, she had always known the past wasn't over. That one day, Dominic would return. What she didn't know was how much she would long to see him again. His arrival wasn't quiet. Dominic Hayes pulled up in a black truck at the winery entrance, like he already owned the place. And now, he did. He stepped out slowly, dark shirt, fitted jeans, and eyes cold as the shadows under the vines. Sophie's father rushed to meet him with a fake smile. "Hayes, listen, I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake, Wallace." Dominic cut him off, voice low like distant thunder. "I bought the debt, every cent. From now on, I'm the man you'll see every day until the account is settled." Sophie appeared at the doorway, her eyes fixed on him. Dominic stopped when he saw her. She was different. Gone was the spoiled little girl he remembered. Now she was a woman with sorrowful eyes, dangerous curves, and lips that looked designed to tempt. But there was more. A hidden emptiness, unresolved pain. "Sophie," he said, her name sliding off his tongue like sweet poison. She stared back, her heart racing. "Dominic!" "You're even more beautiful than I remember," he murmured, walking toward her. "But also more vulnerable." She took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "What do you want, Dominic?" "Justice. Revenge." He gave a dark half-smile. "But first I want a deal." Her father stepped in, flustered. "We can renegotiate, sell assets, work out a plan." Dominic raised a hand to silence him. "I don't want money." Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. "Then what do you want?" He looked her straight in the eyes. "I want you." Silence. "You're joking," she whispered, breathless. "I never joke about property." She stepped back. "I'm not anyone's property." Dominic stepped closer until his body heat closed the space between them. "From today on, you are. My collateral, my bargaining chip, my contract wife, for 1 year. In exchange, I save your family's empire." Sophie felt her heart drop to her stomach. "This is insane. No, this is poetic justice." He stared at her, intense. "You took my freedom, now I take yours, starting with you." She tried to speak, but the words got lost. Her father said nothing, pale, defeated. "I'll sign the papers tonight," Dominic said, turning away. "And you, Sophie, you have until tomorrow to choose marriage or ruin." That night, Sophie locked herself in her room, feeling the world collapse. It was wrong, immoral, twisted, but also irresistibly inevitable, Because as much as she hated what Dominic stood for, there was something about him that drew her in with a dangerous force. The power, the risk, the gaze that stripped her soul with a single blink. And the worst part, a part of her wanted to say yes. As the moonlight spilled through the window, Sophie whispered to herself, voice cracked and breathless, "What he wants from me is exactly what I never thought I'd give." Sophie woke up with burning eyes. She didn't know if she had cried or dreamed of crying. Everything was blurry. The night before felt like a feverish nightmare, a whispered threat under silk sheets. But when she went downstairs and saw her father, disheveled suit, defeated expression, sitting before a black leather folder, she knew the nightmare was real, and Dominic Hayes was waiting. She stopped at the foot of the stairs, heart pounding. "Is he here already?" Her father didn't answer. He just pointed toward the meeting room. Sophie walked down the hallway slowly, as if heading to her own execution. When she opened the door, Dominic was standing by the window, staring out at the golden Texas vineyards, as if they already belonged to him. And they did. He turned as he sensed her presence. "Slept well, wife?" "I'm not your wife yet," she replied, voice steady despite the tremble inside. Dominic walked to the table and slid the folder toward her. "Contract, clear terms, 1 year of legal marriage, joint public appearances, no physical intimacy required unless mutually agreed upon." He glanced at her with a cynical half-smile. "But honestly, I doubt you'll resist." Sophie clenched her jaw. "You want me to sell myself to save my family's name?" "No, I want you to surrender. Because deep down, Sophie, you're just as imprisoned by this life as I was by the one you put me in." She opened the folder with trembling hands, read the terms, all legal, all perfectly structured, cold, professional, and cruel. "This is humiliation," she whispered. "This is payment." Sophie looked up. "Why me? Why not just destroy my father directly?" Dominic stepped close until their bodies almost touched. "Because your pain is the only one he can't bear to watch, and because you've always been what he tried to keep hidden. Sweet on the outside, broken on the inside." Her heart pounded harder. "And you want to break me more." Dominic leaned in, his lips brushing hers. "I want to rebuild you, but my way." The tension was electric, the desire undeniable. And in that moment, Sophie understood the real danger. It wasn't the contract, it wasn't the revenge, it was him. It was what he did to her. Dominic stepped back, still in control. "You have until noon. After that, I lose interest, and you lose everything." Sophie spent the next few hours in her mother's old office, staring at the contract like it was a mirror. Why was she hesitating? Because she knew that by signing, she was selling the last free part of herself. But also because part of her wanted to know how far Dominic could take her. She wanted to know what was behind that dark gaze, behind that controlled pain. And when the clock struck 11:59, she walked into the meeting room and signed. Without hesitation, Dominic didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just looked at her with the same dangerous intensity. "The ceremony is tomorrow, right here. Intimate, formal, but real. And then, you move into my house and start repaying what you owe." That night, Sophie stood in front of the mirror. Naked, she looked at her skin. For the first time, she didn't see just a rich woman raised with rules and polish. She saw a woman on fire, and that fire had his name. Dominic watched her from afar, standing by the guest bedroom window where he had spent the night. He sipped straight whiskey, his eyes locked on her even from a distance. He wanted her, but not like a man seeking revenge. He wanted her the way a wounded man longs for salvation. But first, she would have to learn to belong to him. And while Sophie slept, unaware of what the next day would bring, Dominic murmured to himself in a tone darker than hopeful, "You'll hate me before you love me." The Texas sky was grey that Saturday. Heavy clouds loomed over the Wallace vineyard, as if the universe itself sensed what was about to happen. Sophie adjusted the white dress in front of the mirror, feeling the fabric cling tighter than it should. Not because of the cut, but because of the meaning. It was a simple dress, no sparkle, no veil, no dream, and it would be the dress she wore to marry the man who vowed to destroy her family. "Are you ready?" Her mother's voice came through the door, hesitant, as if burdened with guilt for not stopping this. Sophie took a deep breath. "Never have been, but I will be." In the main hall of the house, soberly decorated, Dominic waited. He wore a dark suit, no tie. His slightly open collar revealed sun-kissed skin and tension in every line of his neck. He didn't smile, just observed every detail, every step of the people around him. When Sophie appeared at the entrance, the room fell silent. The world seemed to stop. Dominic stared at her like a man looking at something he shouldn't touch, but already owned. And Sophie held his gaze, chin high, even as everything inside her trembled. She walked down the aisle as if heading toward her own execution, but with every step, she felt the burn of his gaze on her skin, reminding her she belonged to him now. The judge delivered the fastest wedding speech in Texas history. No vows, no applause, just the formal words. "Dominic Hayes, do you accept Sophie Wallace as your lawful wife according to this marriage contract?" "I do," he said, his voice like molten steel. "Sophie Wallace, do you accept Dominic Hayes as your husband under the agreed terms?" She hesitated for a second, then exhaled. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by this state, you are legally married." A heavy silence fell over the room. Dominic stepped closer, took her hand, and slipped a simple ring onto her finger. It wasn't gold, not encrusted. It was iron, cold, solid, unbreakable. "My wife," he whispered in her ear. "From this moment until the last second of the contract, you are mine." Later, in the new house, a modern minimalist mansion on the outskirts of Austin, surrounded by high walls and cameras everywhere, Sophie walked through the entrance hall cautiously. Dominic followed behind her, like a wolf leading its prey into a new cage. "This is your new home," he said, opening the master bedroom door, "and your new bed." Sophie stopped at the threshold, heart racing. "You made it clear there would be no physical involvement required. And I stand by that. But don't be fooled." He stepped closer, eyes burning. "You're already under my skin, Sophie. I'm just waiting for you to admit you want me too." She met his gaze with anger, and something deeper. "What you feel for me isn't desire, it's punishment." Dominic smirked. "And what do you feel for me, Sophie?" She didn't answer, because the answer would be fascination, disgust, fire, all at once. He leaned his face toward hers, lips almost brushing. His breath was warm, nearly unbearable. "You'll sleep with me when you want to, not before, but you won't resist for long." He stepped back. "Desire always wins, and you already feel it." Hours later, Sophie was alone in the bedroom, staring out the window at the darkness. The night felt heavier inside her than it did outside. She touched the iron ring on her finger. This union wasn't love. It was war. But something in Dominic awakened a hunger in her no other man ever had, and that scared her more than any contract. Across the house, Dominic watched the security monitor showing her room. He saw her rest her forehead against the glass, touch her face in confusion, and lie down, hugging the pillow, without sleeping. He turned off the monitor, poured himself another whiskey, and whispered, "First she fears me, then she hates me, And then she begs for me. And as the moon rose over Austin, one truth became clear to Dominic. Sophie Wallace was already his. She just didn't know it yet. Sophie woke up with her entire body tense. The sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains, and for a moment she forgot where she was. But when she opened her eyes and saw the unfamiliar room, minimalist, cold, immense, the memory hit like a punch. Marriage. Contract. Dominic Hayes. She sat up, still wearing the white nightgown from the night before, and felt the iron ring press against her skin. A cruel reminder that she now belonged to him. For a whole year. But what unsettled her the most wasn't the contract. It was that despite everything, she still felt a strange heat in her belly whenever she thought of him. The man she was supposed to hate was the only one who could strip her soul with a single look. Dominic was already awake, wearing dark pants, shirtless, making coffee in the kitchen. His defined muscles, faint scars across his chest and back, his focused gaze, everything about him radiated danger and dominance. When Sophie appeared at the door, he didn't turn around. He simply said, "Sleep well, wife?" As well as one can sleep with invisible chains wrapped around their body. He smiled, still not looking at her. "I like the way you fight, but you'll learn. Resistance is just the slowest path to surrender." She walked closer, arms crossed. "Is this all just a game to you?" "No. Games have rules. This," he finally turned, eyes piercing hers, "is war. And I'm the conquered territory?" "No. You're the battlefield. And the weapon." Sophie felt a shiver run down her spine. He stepped forward, offering her a cup of coffee. "Drink. We have a long day ahead. We're going to the vineyard." "The vineyard?" "As of today, you carry the Hayes name, and I want everyone to see it. I want your father to see it. I want the world to know you belong to me." Sophie clenched the cup, swallowing her rage. "You're using me as a trophy." "Wrong!" Dominic leaned in, lips brushing her ear, voice low and warm. "I'm shaping you into a symbol." She pulled away, trying to control her breath, but she was already trembling, not from fear, from anticipation. At the vineyard, everyone paused when the couple arrived. Dominic in a flawless black suit, Sophie in a light blue dress he had left on her bed, with a note, "Wear this. It'll make the right people jealous." Her father watched from a distance, fists clenched, face rigid. She knew he hated seeing Dominic beside her, but he also knew there was nothing he could do. Dominic walked with his hand at her waist, firm, as if reminding everyone, including her, who was in control now. "You're loving this," she muttered between clenched teeth, forcing a smile for the cameras covering the event. "Loving it would be an understatement. I'm feeding my soul with this." She stopped smiling, turned to him, anger in her eyes. "One day you'll fall, and you'll be so blinded by revenge you won't even notice you've lost everything." Dominic pulled her aside, away from the crowd, into one of the vineyard's inner halls. He pinned her gently against the wall, his body close, but not touching. "I lost everything once, Sophie. Prison, name, freedom. But you know what I learned in there?" "What?" "That all of that comes back. But the soul only comes back if someone brings it back." He touched her face with the back of his fingers. "You don't see it yet, but you're saving me." Tears welled up in her eyes, though she didn't know why. "And who's going to save me from you?" He leaned in, lips so close the world disappeared. "Maybe you, or maybe it's already too late." She closed her eyes, expecting the kiss. But he pulled back at the last second. "Not yet," he said. "I want you to ask for it." Sophie stood there, breathless, her whole body on fire. He smiled and returned to the event. And as the guests' voices filled the hall once more, Sophie leaned her head against the wall and whispered, "I'm starting to want what I should hate." Sophie spent the rest of the event as if walking on shards of glass. The guests' touches, the curious stares, the whispered comments about the marriage, it all felt far away. The only sound truly echoing in her mind was his voice. "I want you to ask me." And she hated how much she wanted to do exactly that. Back at the mansion hours later, she entered her room alone. She tore off the light blue dress with anger and threw it to the floor. Pacing back and forth, she felt like a bomb about to explode. He was getting under her skin. She knew it, felt it, and she was letting it burn, slowly. Worst of all, she was letting it happen. Dominic entered soon after, jacket slung over his arm, eyes resting on her like he knew she was still burning. "Sleeping in separate rooms again, wife?" "Depends. Are you still playing with fire?" He smiled, calm. "Playing implies distraction, and you, Sophie, have been anything but a distraction." She stared at him, defiant. "Do you enjoy provoking me? It's not provocation when the other side is already waiting to surrender." She crossed her arms, pretending to be strong, but inside her whole body pulsed. "One day, Dominic, this will turn against you." He took a step, then another, until he was so close she could feel his breath on her skin. "I hope so," he murmured, mouth near hers but not touching. "Because if it turns on me, it means you're in it, all the way." She closed her eyes, and again he pulled away. "Good night, wife." And he left. But that night, Sophie couldn't take it. She got up barefoot, wearing only the cotton shirt he had accidentally left in her room. She walked through the dark hallway, the only sound her own footsteps. She slowly opened his door. Dominic was sitting in the leather armchair, whiskey in hand, as if he had known she would come. He lifted his eyes, saw the shirt on her body, the lack of fear in her eyes, and the presence of desire. She walked toward him in silence. "So you came," he said. "I'm not here to beg," she replied, firm. "Then what are you here for?" She stood between his legs, looking down at him, her hair cascading in waves over her shoulders. "I'm here to show you I know how to play too." Dominic placed the glass on the table, gripped her waist with both hands, and pulled her onto his lap. She didn't resist. "Are you offering yourself, Sophie?" "I'm allowing myself. Out of pride or want." She didn't answer. He smiled. "I'll find out." Then he kissed her. It was the kind of kiss that burns both skin and soul. Nothing soft, nothing romantic. It was possession, hunger, uncontrolled. She pressed her lips against his, arms around his neck, legs slipping around his hips, their bodies locked together. His hands slid under the shirt, exploring her skin with surgical precision. But before they crossed the line, Dominic stopped. She was breathless, confused. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I want you to want me more tomorrow than you do today." "You're cruel." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm patient, and you're becoming my downfall." A pause. "And I'm loving every second of it." She got off his lap on trembling legs. "This is torture. This is control, and you're about to lose yours." The next morning, Sophie woke with her body still sensitive, her skin still marked by his touch. At the breakfast table, he waited, flawless, reading a newspaper. "Sleep well?" "I'm really starting to hate you," she said, sitting down. He looked up calmly. "Good. Hate is the first step toward complete emotional surrender." She grabbed her coffee, took a sip, and met his gaze with a faint smile. "Careful, Dominic. You're getting dangerously close to falling for your own trap." He closed the newspaper slowly. "Who says I haven't already?" In that moment, Sophie realized the game wasn't about power anymore. It was about who would fall first, her to passion, or him to the love he swore he'd never feel. Dominic's comment lingered in the air like undetonated dynamite. "Who says I haven't already?" Sophie felt her blood go cold and her belly warm. He didn't say he loved her, but he left enough space for her to imagine it. And coming from Dominic Hayes, that was almost a confession. She didn't respond. She just stood up from the table, head held high, heart racing. "I need air." Dominic didn't stop her. He just watched her leave, with that look that read every corner of her soul. He knew what he'd said. He knew what it caused. And he waited for what would come next. Sophie walked through the estate gardens, the Texas sun warm on her shoulders, but her heart burning hotter. She sat on the stone bench beneath the fig tree and ran her hands over her face. Am I falling for him? The question echoed inside her like a sin. It was absurd. It was wrong. It was inevitable. She thought of running, not from the house, but from him, from the emotions, from the confusion. But before she could gather her thoughts, she heard footsteps behind her, and then he appeared. Dominic. No suit, just a white linen shirt with the top 2 buttons undone. The wind tousled his hair, and Sophie wanted to lose herself in that broad chest in front of her. "If you came to finish this morning's provocation, don't waste your time," she said, not looking at him. "I didn't come to provoke. I came to feel." She turned to him, confused. "Feel? You." He sat beside her, but didn't touch her. The silence between them was a taut rope ready to snap. "You surprise me," he said, staring ahead. "When I thought about destroying your family, I figured you were just part of the package, fragile, spoiled, shallow. But you're none of that." He turned to face her now. "You're the woman who takes my breath away without even knowing it." She let out a bitter laugh. "And you're the man who destroyed my freedom, Dominic. Or maybe," he leaned closer, "I'm the only one who showed you that you were never truly free." She turned her face toward him, now inches away. "This is twisted. This is real." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "If you touch me now, I won't pull away." He didn't reply. He just kissed her. This time, there was no teasing, no hesitation, just surrender. The kiss was urgent, ravenous, desperate. Dominic's hands moved across her back as if memorizing every curve. Hers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as if inviting him to claim what little control she had left. He lifted her into his arms with ease and carried her inside. They climbed the stairs like 2 bodies doomed to be lost in each other. The door slammed shut. The clothes vanished. Dominic laid Sophie onto the sheets as if she were made of fire, touched her with a reverence she'd never known, kissed every part of her like he was begging forgiveness for all the pain he'd caused. And then he took her, with intensity, with dominance, with passion. But there was something more in that moment, something neither of them dared to name. Hours later, Sophie was lying with her head on his chest, listening to the strong beats of a heart she once swore was made of stone. Dominic stroked her hair with the tips of his fingers. "I broke so many rules just by wanting you," he said in a low voice. "But I don't regret a single one." "I hated you," she replied, glancing at the iron ring on her finger. "But today, I wanted to be yours like I've never wanted to belong to anyone else." He kissed her again, a calm kiss, grateful, real. "Are you afraid of what you feel?" "I'm afraid it will end." "Then I won't let it." She closed her eyes, for the first time, not out of fear, but in peace. And in that moment, between sheets and unspoken promises, Sophie knew the man she was supposed to fear was now the only one she trusted to hold her soul. What happened between Dominic and Sophie didn't stay secret for long. One of the mansion's staff, curious and careless, saw Sophie leaving Dominic's room on several late nights and spread the word like venom. The news reached Mr. Wallace. Already humiliated by the forced contract, the patriarch exploded when he found out his daughter was now giving herself to the enemy. That's when Melissa, Dominic's rejected ex-fiancée, found out about the contract and saw her opportunity for revenge. Wounded pride, a thirst for destruction, she met with Mr. Wallace, and together they swore to take Dominic Hayes down, not just publicly, but emotionally. They knew exactly where to strike, the one place Dominic claimed he didn't have: his heart. The ring of the phone shattered the soft silence of the bedroom. Dominic opened his eyes first, unmoving, Sophie still asleep on his chest. Since that first night, the most intimate moment they'd shared, she had become a constant in his bed, and he couldn't deny how alive it made him feel, desired, and as he was learning, truly in love with her presence. But he also knew that even now, this relationship was hanging by a thread, and it would take just one breath to tear it all down. He grabbed the phone from the table and answered. "Speak." His private security guard's voice was serious on the other end. "Mr. Wallace is heading to the property, and he's not alone." Dominic closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Of course Wallace wouldn't let this go. He knew. He'd known since the moment he touched Sophie, like he'd never touched anyone before. And now, the war that began as revenge was about to become personal. Sophie woke up minutes later, alone in bed, Dominic's side still warm. She looked around, searching. "Dominic?" No response. She slipped on her robe and went downstairs. Found him on the porch, already dressed, his face tense and his eyes fixed on the front gate, where two dark cars were speeding in. "What's happening?" He turned to her, hesitating for a moment. "Your father's coming, and judging by the looks of it, he's not here to talk." Sophie's heart clenched. "Does he know?" "I don't know what he knows, but he's about to find out everything." The cars skidded to a stop. Sophie's father stepped out first, red-faced and furious. Next to him, two lawyers, and behind them, a woman Sophie recognized immediately. Melissa, Dominic's ex, the woman who helped destroy him years ago, and now had returned like a ghost. Dominic descended the steps calmly. Sophie stood beside him, clutching her robe tight. "You're early," Dominic said with a provoking tone. "Were you hoping for coffee?" "Don't play games with me, Hayes," Wallace shouted. "You crossed the line. You touched my daughter." Sophie stepped forward. "He didn't force me. I went to him willingly." Her father looked at her like he'd been punched in the gut. "You don't know what you're doing, Sophie." "I know exactly what I'm doing for the first time. I chose, and I chose him." Dominic didn't hide the pride in his eyes, but Melissa stepped forward, a venomous smile on her lips. "Beautiful scene. Shame it won't last, because I have proof that this man is still involved in illegal business." She pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to the lawyers. "Suspicious transactions, evidence of corruption, money laundering." Sophie's eyes widened. Dominic said nothing. "That's a lie," she said, staring at him. "Tell me it's a lie." He stayed silent, because he knew Melissa, knew exactly what she was capable of, and his silence said more than any defense. "You used my daughter," Wallace growled, "and now you'll pay." "I didn't use her," Dominic said firm. "But yes, I have unresolved accounts. And I've made choices in the past, but I'm not running from them or from her." Sophie felt the world spinning. "Dominic, you don't have to stay," he said, pain in his eyes. "If you want to go, I'll understand." She swallowed hard, but didn't move. "I stayed when it was just a contract. Now that it's real, I won't run." Melissa laughed. "Foolish girl. You'll fall with him." Sophie looked at her with a strength she didn't know she had. Maybe, but I'll fall, holding his hand. Later the house was quiet. Dominic sat in the living room, whiskey in hand. Sophie appeared and sat beside him. "What's in that folder, Dominic?" "Half truth, half lies, but enough to raise suspicion. And if she wants to, she can destroy me." "Then why aren't you fighting back?" He looked at her with the most vulnerable eyes she'd ever seen. "Because for the first time, I actually have something to lose." She placed her hand gently on his face. "Then we'll fight, but we'll do it together." As night fell over the mansion, Dominic finally understood. Revenge had lost its shine, because now all he wanted wasn't to win. It was not to lose her. The storm didn't wait to hit. The next morning, the press was already outside the property. Cameras, microphones, drones circling the mansion like hungry vultures. The headlines were poisonous. Dominic Hayes accused of money laundering, Wallace daughter involved, marriage or blackmail, the empire that collapsed for love. Sophie watched it all from the bedroom window, arms crossed, heart shattered. She knew what they had, knew half of it was built on old lies and twisted truths. But the other half? She had no idea. Dominic had been in the office since dawn, on the phone, typing, contacting everyone he could, trying to contain the explosion. But even with the world falling apart, the thing weighing on him the most was the look in Sophie's eyes. He opened the bedroom door mid-morning, shirt sleeves rolled up, face exhausted. "You shouldn't be watching this. I don't want to hide from reality. Then come see it up close." Sophie followed Dominic to the office. On the desk, scattered documents, old contracts, bank records, and at the center, Melissa's folder, the spark that set off the scandal. "Is all this true?" she asked, voice low. Dominic looked at her for a long time before replying. "Some of it, yes. I moved money off the books in the early years after prison. It was the only way to rebuild with a ruined name. But I was never corrupt. I never hurt anyone. I never did what she's trying to imply." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I thought I could erase the past with the future I was building with you. But I can't." He stepped closer. "And now, Sophie, this is your real choice. It's not about a contract anymore, it's about you. You can walk away now, and none of this will touch you." She looked at him, eyes filled with tears, but burning too. "You protected me from the worst version of myself. Gave me a voice, courage, truth. And now that the world is screaming, you want me to run. I want you to be safe. Then hear me. The only thing that destroys me now is being away from you." Dominic lowered his head, overcome with emotion. When he looked up, his gaze was of a man both broken and whole. "I've never loved anyone the way I love you." She stepped forward and touched his face. "Then fight. Fight for us." By late afternoon, Dominic called a press conference at the winery itself. Sophie stood at his side, wearing a simple black jumpsuit, elegant and powerful, hair pulled back, calm expression, but inside, her heart thundered. Dominic faced the cameras. "Many of you know my name from scandals, accusations, and dubious headlines. I'm not a saint, I've made mistakes, but I'm also a man who was condemned before he was heard, who was betrayed, and now I'm ready to pay the price for the truth." Reporters began shouting questions. He raised his hand. "Yes, I moved funds through alternative channels, but everything was reported. It was clean. The difference is no one wanted to see that, because I'm the man who came back from hell to reclaim what was taken from me." Then he looked at Sophie and took her hand. "But in the process, I found something I never expected. Love. She's not part of my revenge. She's the only reason I still want redemption." Sophie then spoke, clear and strong. "I chose to stay, knowing everything. Because the world can try to paint Dominic Hayes as a monster, but I know the man, and he taught me what strength is, what surrender means, and what true love feels like." The cameras burst into flashes, but Sophie didn't blink, and neither did Dominic. That night, back at the mansion, the two of them lay in the garden, on a blanket, staring up at the starry sky. "You were brave today," he said, gently running his fingers along her arm. "It wasn't bravery, it was love." He turned to face her. "We still have enemies, Sophie. I know, and this may not end so easily." She smiled. "But I have you, and that's enough." He kissed her there beneath the stars. "No more war, only a promise. Nothing will tear us apart, not the past, not revenge, not fear." Because now they weren't just bound by a contract. They were united by something no one else could control. The kind of love born in chaos and forged in fire. The calm that settled over the house after the press conference was brief, almost a silent truce between the forces circling Dominic and Sophie, but even the stars seemed to know the real blow hadn't come yet. And when it did, it came from within. The next morning, Dominic received a legal notice, not from Melissa, not from Wallace, but from Claire, his former personal assistant, the woman he trusted with his eyes closed. She had been by his side through the darkest years. She knew every password, every move, every weakness. And now she was accusing him of harassment, emotional abuse, and misuse of confidential information. "This is a setup," Dominic muttered, looking at the documents with the cold exhaustion of someone who was no longer surprised, just tired. Sophie, sitting beside him, held her breath. "But Claire, she was your ally." "I let her in too much. I trusted her. Maybe I was even blind." He rubbed his forehead. "She was always loyal. Or so I thought. But now I see. She wanted me. And she didn't know how to handle rejection." Sophie stayed silent. She knew what that kind of accusation meant. Not just legal danger, but emotional devastation, the kind that poisons reputations and relationships. "Dominic, is there any truth to it?" He turned to her. "I never touched her, Sophie, never misled her. I was just too blind to see how she felt. And now, she wants to destroy me in the worst way. Then we'll face it together." But there was hesitation in her voice. Small, subtle, but real, and Dominic felt it. That night, the silence between them wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Sophie didn't sleep in his room, and Dominic didn't go after her. For the first time since they had fully given in to each other, they felt like strangers. Two souls sharing a castle, surrounded by war. The next day, the scandal was already in the papers. Dominic Hayes accused of harassment and manipulation by former assistant. Sophie Wallace involved in alleged emotional triangle. Sophie watched the report with trembling hands, and then her mother appeared. "You see, sweetheart, this is what I feared. He's pulling you into the abyss with him. He's being falsely accused." Sophie tried to argue. "Are you sure? Because when a woman accuses, there's always something. Doubt is a dangerous seed, and Sophie felt it take root." That night, she confronted Dominic. "Tell me the truth, all of it, now." He approached her slowly, eyes steady. "I already have. I never did anything with Claire. She loved me in silence. And when I chose you," she snapped. "But why now? Why risk everything? Because unrequited love can be more destructive than hate." He stepped closer. "Do you believe me?" She hesitated. That pause was more painful than any accusation. "I want to believe you." He stepped back, like he'd just lost her. "Then maybe I'm not the problem, Sophie. Maybe it's the world that taught you to run when things get ugly." She looked at him, eyes glassy. "I'm not running. Not yet. But you will." She didn't answer, because part of her knew he was right. At dawn, Sophie packed her bags, just one. She left through the front door without a word, and Dominic, watching from upstairs, said nothing. He didn't stop her, because loving someone also means letting them go when they're not ready to fight until the end. In the hotel where she took refuge, Sophie stayed awake all night, replaying everything. The contract, the first glance, the first touch, the kiss that burned her soul, the night they gave in to each other like nothing else existed, and now, the emptiness. She felt she had walked away from something she would never find again, but she needed space, certainty, courage. Then her phone rang. It was Dominic. She answered without a word. On the other end, his voice was low, steady, and broken. "If you're going to leave me, Sophie, just promise me one thing." "What?" "At least say goodbye while looking into my eyes." And in that instant, Sophie knew she couldn't run from what she felt, because what she and Dominic had was stronger than pride, scandal, or fear. The call ended, but his words still vibrated inside her, as if whispered directly into her skin. "If you're going to leave me, say goodbye while looking into my eyes." Sophie sat for a long time at the edge of the hotel bed, staring into nothing. The world outside kept spinning, headlines, accusations, scandal, but inside her there was only that one request. And then, without thinking twice, she stood up, put on her coat, and left. The Austin night was cold. The wind cut like the silence between them, but her heart beat steadily, not to run, but to return. Dominic was sitting on the library couch when he heard the sound of the front door opening. For a moment, he thought it was the past coming back to collect. But when he looked up and saw Sophie standing in the hallway, eyes shining, hands trembling, he knew it was the future trying to survive. She walked slowly toward him, and when their eyes met, she said, "I came to look at you before leaving, but now that I'm here, I can't go." He didn't move. "Why not?" "Because if I leave you now, Dominic, I'll never again find someone who loves me even in my doubts. And I'll never again love someone who made me so strong by stripping away all my masks." He stood up. "Are you still afraid?" "Yes, but I'm more afraid of not trying." "Then stay." She stepped into his arms, tears falling. "I don't want to run from you anymore, or from myself, or from what we are." Dominic held her like he was holding on to his own soul. "I've been destroyed so many times, Sophie. But now I finally understand. All of it led me to you." She looked into his eyes. "Then fight for us. End this. Prove your innocence, not for revenge, but for love." "I already started." "How?" "I hired a special team. We already found traces of Claire's bank activity. Data manipulation. A false accusation built for extortion. And her. She'll go down, and she'll take everyone who tried to destroy what we've built." Sophie nodded. "I want to be with you. Until the end." He kissed her. Not a kiss of hunger, but a kiss of relief, of certainty, of a new beginning. 2 weeks later, the evidence was released. Claire was arrested. Melissa was exposed for attempting to use forged documents to incriminate Dominic. Wallace, silenced by the press and shunned by the Texan elite. And Dominic Hayes, redeemed. He cleared his name, rebuilt his reputation, but none of that mattered anymore, because that same week, he proposed to Sophie, this time with no contract, no revenge, just love. The ceremony was held in the vineyard garden, among the vines now blooming in silence. Sophie wore a light silk dress, hair flowing freely in the wind. Dominic, a dark grey suit with no tie. The two of them stood hand in hand, eyes locked on one another. "You're no longer my contractual wife," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are my choice, my home, my salvation." "And you're no longer my enemy," she whispered. "You're the man I choose every single day, even when I'm afraid. Do you promise that I'll love you, that you'll never run again?" She smiled through tears. "I promise, through every pain and every sunrise." At the end of the ceremony, Dominic swept her into his arms and kissed her with the intensity of a man who'd survived hell. And there, beneath the pink Texas sky, Sophie knew nothing would ever tear them apart again. Not the past, not their enemies, not even their own fears. Because the love that began as a contract became the only truth strong enough to survive chaos, pain, and fire, and be reborn, stronger, on the other side of destruction. 2 years later, the vineyard was now called Hayes and Wallace Estates, a new name for a new era, the scandal forgotten, the revenge buried. Dominic Hayes was finally a man at peace, and all because Sophie Wallace hadn't let him fall apart. She had rebuilt him with her hands, her soul, and her heart. That sunny afternoon, he walked between the vines with a soft smile on his face and a little girl on his shoulders. "Higher, Daddy," the girl squealed, her light brown hair flying in the wind. "If I lift you any higher, you'll touch the sky," he laughed. "That's what I want." From across the field, Sophie watched them. Flowy dress, hair loose, her belly already slightly rounded with their second child. She watched them from a distance, and her chest swelled with a feeling she couldn't quite name. It was more than happiness. It was redemption. Dominic approached, gently set the girl down, kissed her forehead, and wrapped his arms around Sophie from behind. "I was waiting for you," he murmured. "You two looked beautiful together." "She's just like you, stubborn and full of light." "And this baby?" she asked, placing her hands on her belly. "Do you think they'll take after their father?" "I hope they inherit the part of me that knows how to love," he replied tenderly. Sophie turned to him. "You learned how to love on your own, Dominic. I was just here to remind you that you deserved it." He kissed her then, slowly, without rush. The wind danced between the vines, the sun bathed everything in gold, and their little girl ran through the leaves as if the world were weightless. And it was. Because now there were no contracts, no revenge, no pain or fear, only home, and a love that survived the chaos. Thank you for watching my story. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more stories like this. And don't forget to leave a like. It helps our channel grow and reach more people who love these kinds of emotional, passionate tales. The next story is already on your screen, full of drama and romance that will move your heart once again. Stay with me, and let's dive into this new journey together. See you soon, my dear friends. Catch you in the next video.